Welcome back into the shop, everybody, on a day when you can really feel those hints of spring. It's glorious out. Probably touching 70 degrees, which means it's pretty comfortable in the shop today. And it is time to begin tearing into our Marantz 4430 quad rail system. And as I mentioned, this AM/FM receiver with quadraphonic sound, and as I mentioned in the last video, this is inordinately complicated because you're basically talking about two stereo systems in one. Instead of two channels, left, right, you now have four channels to contend with. So it's a very complicated system. This unit is not much bigger in physical size than, say, a 2230 or a 2270 Marantz, but yet inside it packs twice as much volume of components in. So we need to be careful. We need to when you do these things, you need to be very respectful of the layout. And you have to have a high degree of protection against shorting something out or making things worse. Now, we listened to the unit in part one, which was the overview of the unit. We took a good listen to the unit. Yes, we got sound. It's, I don't know, sometimes the left channel's, left channel is pretty steady, but the right channel comes and goes, and it depends whether you put it on the front speakers or the back speakers. There's a lot I don't know about this unit, but I do know generally when things go bad in these units, it's generally where the mechanical and the electrical come together, meaning switches and knobs that turn to increase or decrease. Those things tend to collect oxidation on the contact points, and when you go to fire it up after 10 or 20, I don't know the last time this unit was run, you have oxidation buildup and you have sound that's low or not coming out of one channel. And we always want to start from the simple cures first and work up to, to go more in depth. We don't just tear into a unit, oh, we don't have any sound coming out of one channel, so it must be, our output transistors are bad, so we need to go in there and start tearing things apart. No. These units, particularly ones that are built by Marantz, are built for the long haul. And it's always been my philosophy of restoration that the less we do, the better. In my opinion, and in some of the things that I've encountered over the 10 plus years I've been on this channel and doing repair and restoration work, I would say the number one mistake that's made is overdoing repair, or just thinking, well, because I have a unit that's old, I necessarily need to go in there and replace every electrolytic capacitor within the unit. And the problem is, unless you're really experienced and very adept at soldering, particularly in very tight and crowded situations like it's on the inside of this board, you're apt to find yourself in a problematic area where if you reverse the electrolytic and you get the positive where the negative should be and the negative where the positive should be, and you put the power on, you might do irreparable and irrestorable harm to a unit like this. So I've always had the philosophy, when you go in for a hangnail, you don't ask the doctor doesn't look to rebuild your whole human system from pulmonary to neurological. They just get in there and they address the problem. So we need to be respectful of that procedural excellence that has certainly come before us in the way of restoration of vintage audio pieces. Most things that I have ever repaired require a low degree of restoration. I'm no genius for sure, and I'm very lucky that I try to pick quality units because I don't want something that's been left out in the rain or underneath of a leaky roof or look like it was used for a boat anchor for years. I want something that somebody had an obvious amount of care with the unit, showing respect for the unit and respect for purchasing something so expensive like this in 1972, 78, on the order of $500 back then, which is a large expenditure. Even today, that would be considered a relatively large expenditure. So having said that, we want to certainly remove the faceplate, the glass here. We want to get the knobs off. We want to do some basic lubrication of the unit. And we definitely want to restore the electrolytic capacitors, those great things from the first video that are in the power supply area. This, I believe, is critical. And we also have some units of these electrolytic capacitors in the output area, or that part of the system that drives the speakers and allows the volume to go up and down as more electricity flows into the circuit. So let's start taking it apart and let's get going. Now, the number one way we protect the unit right off the bat is that we try to work in a no power situation, and sometimes I have butterfingers and I might pop this on by accident or have a weak mental moment and just flip that on when it's in a state where I might create a short circuit. So bing, I remove the plug and we are in good shape here. So I've got 4 little mounting screws on the front. I need to be careful. These things have to come off. The balance knobs have to come off. And they're sometimes the most difficult thing to get off, and these can be kind of seized on too because they've been there for 50, 60 years, so we need to be super careful. So I'm going to go ahead and start breaking this down, and hopefully everything will go okay. I encountered a little bit of with that bass and that treble knob, but you have to be patient. Even if I had to squirt that with a little, I would be very careful because of the silk screen, but I would gradually just rock that back and forth and make very sure if you're going to get in there and try to pry that you don't mar the faceplate of it, because these are almost irreplaceable and very difficult to find, particularly for the quad unit. They are making remanufactured new ones, but authenticity is key. So what we want to do now is put this aside until we're almost done the project, and then we'll be cleaning this and talking about the right way to do that, the wrong way to do it, and giving some cautions about dealing with silk screen printing and things like that. I do have one area where it was probably bumped here years ago, but because these are relatively rare units to find, it's about the best that I could find within the price range that I could afford, so I was glad that I had it. So it's time to go put this in a safe place, and we will consider how we're going to start approaching the power supply board here. We're going to remove the bottom plate here, and we're just going to suss it out. We're going to take I'm going to take my time and really study it a little bit, right? The lost art of studying something instead of getting my big ham-fisted hands in there and wreaking havoc. I want to study the mechanics of how this thing is put together, particularly the power supply board, because I would love to just be able to simply lift that off, or worst case scenario, I have to work it from the bottom side while leaving the board intact. And we want to make sure we note the locations where those, I'll show you in a minute, where those parts to be replaced are, so that we can do that the correct way. Okay, so let me put this in a safe place and remove the bottom panel here, and we will be moving forward. March. There's a look at the bottom, and there was only 3 of these little screws here that hold. It should be 4 of them, but there were only 3 here. And this is the adapter that allows what they call the front and rear logic for distributing sound. And this is made so nicely. This is really the early days of the integrated circuit. But when I remove those 4 screws, that just slides right out. It has a slotted, you can see that slot that fits in there really. I mean, Marantz just does things with such an exceedingly high quality. We can now take this unit, this subunit here, and put this aside. Not sure if we'll have to unscrew something else up here to be able to get this back the bottom panel off. But we certainly needed to remove it, because we only may be able to access the things we need to replace from the bottom. We may not be able to to have enough freedom of movement on the power supply board right there to be able to effectively change out those old electrolytic capacitors. Got those screws, just comes right off. I just love the way Marantz does things, and you can see on the bottom is complicated too. And like I said, this is the reason you need to study things and not go charging in like a cavalry. We have things that protect against shorts, paper that's here, so it's very important that things be studied carefully to understand the best way to go about it. When all said and done, it may require very simple. There might be a limit to what we can do. In other words, down here, can we remove this board to change out this 50 volt 100 microfarad unit right down there, or that capacitor? Well, it remains to be seen how much flexibility we're going to have in terms of accessing things in here. And that's why you have to be extraordinarily patient in your approach, and don't cause harm. It's like the physician's oath. Do no harm would be the first rule of physician and the oath that he or she takes. So we want to be just as meticulous in undertaking this study here. Perhaps you can see I was able to, there was 4 screws holding down this board on the 4 corners, the power supply. This is the relay. If it's in a safe condition, it'll allow the power to go onto the whole unit. Otherwise, it'll restrict it. It won't let the unit power on. It's a safety feature that's built in this relay. So I've got enough flexibility in the board. I do not want to interfere with the stringing of the tuner string here. Boy, you talk about something that's once you start getting into having to restring that, let me tell you, I've done that like maybe a dozen times. It is a bear. But I think I have enough flexibility to be able to lift that up to get underneath and begin changing out some of these components. But I don't want to do anything until I find out if I have in stock, which I should, the replacement parts that I need. So I'm going to go ahead. You can see right there a 50 volt 330 microfarad unit. You'll see it has a negative there. These things are polarized. They have a negative and a positive. It's important that be obeyed when replacements are put in. So we're going to go slowly. I think I'm going to try to work from the bottom here, figure out what we have down in this one. We have a 470 microfarad 63 volts. So we want to make sure that we put in a unit voltage wise that has at least a higher power rating than what we're taking out. So I'm going to see what I have in the way of stock here. We looked in our supply box, and I have a lot of these. These electrolytic capacitors. We have a 470 microfarad, 63 volts, so that's perfect. I've pulled that one. You can see the size, how much smaller these new units are than the old one. And we're going to start with this one back here. I'm going to remove this one first. So I'm examining the bottom here to make sure I know where the location is underneath. And as best I can determine, it's going to be this one and this one here. So I have my desoldering iron here, which has a sucker, a vacuum thing that pulls the solder off once it gets up to temperature. So I want to let this get very hot, and then I have my soldering iron here. Yeah, this one's just about had it. I think I'm going to need a new one. And I'm going to do one at a time. Don't remove all of these at once. That's the biggest mistake people make, besides failing to note the polarity or the plus or minus of these electrolytic capacitors. Okay? So, see you in a couple minutes. Pretty lucky I got that first one out there. Let me get the right board. You can see the empty spot down there. You can see a little plus sign, and that helps guide to make sure that we get the polarity or the plus minus correct on it. Here you can see, as I was talking about before, the size differential and how far we have advanced in terms of technology in the production of electrolytic capacitors. So I'm going to go ahead and install this. I think the bottom's looking pretty good there, and move along. I think we got the hardest one first. See the leads popping through the bottom, so I'm going to go ahead and solder them down. I'm not the best solderer in the world, but I'll make it happen. Looks pretty good, shiny. Now I'm going to go ahead and clip them, and make sure you're wearing eye protection when you take your clippers and clip off those leads. It's a heck of a way to lose an eye with a flying piece of basically shrapnel there. Be careful. There's our first one, sitting pretty in there. Looking pretty good. I think we got the hardest one, and now I'm just going to move across and do the other ones on there. These power supplies, always the most critical part. High power flowing through here, okay? Always very carefully. So I'm going to go pull out the rest of the replacements, and one by one we're going to knock them off. Okay, how does that look? We got those changed out there. We did it properly. Have that reinstalled properly without any breaks. That should give a lot of service on that power board. And I also started up the units to just test my work. I did one at a time here, and always make sure you do one at a time, okay, so you don't get confused on values and voltages. So
after being struck by a pickup truck at the hospital. NBA rights after more than 20 years without them.
Sounds good. So we're back in the saddle on that.
States that issued one-time payments to taxpayers in 2022 after a couple of tough economic years.
So in closing today, we're going to get everything buttoned up real neatly, get all of the parts and all the supplies put back in place. We need to maintain a really well-ordered work field here, especially on the bench. But I think next time we want to try to look at the output boards here, power out the speakers. There's a lot of power flows through these units, so we want to make sure that we are in good shape in terms of what we replace on that. And I'm looking at 63 volt 220 microfarad, 63 volt 220 63. I see I don't have one here, so I'm going to have to I'm not going to replace them with lower values. It's really critical. So this is going to slow us down a bit. But I'm going to have to order some of these for replacement. There's just no ifs, ands, and buts about it. So I'm going to take care of that. So I don't think I have any of the proper voltage rating here. 220. I only go up to 50 volts here, so that's just not going to cut it. So, well, I don't have everything in the shop. I try, but oh well. Well, I know what I need to do. I need to get in there and order some more parts for the restoration, but I'm happy today that the what they call the recapping, are putting in the new caps into the power supply board is done, because that's generally that in the output board to the speakers, the 4-channel speakers, that would be the places that get the most wear and tear electrically speaking. So having that power supply board redone gives a lot of peace of mind. Mounted properly, no short circuits, just done very carefully with a high degree of attention. Going slowly, take your time. This is a hobby here. It's not you're not being people aren't bringing you units to be repaired and things. So if you undertake this, once again, be careful. Electricity can be lethal, and leave it to the pros for sure. If you have a unit that needs to be restored, there are some restoration people out there that will undertake that. I'm just too much into my own stuff to be restored, and I have other projects I still haven't gotten to. But I think that they're out there, and I might be able to recommend or point you in a direction where you can get some restoration work done. Anyway, we have definitely moved ahead here with the power supply. We've done no damage, and that's a good thing when it comes to restoration. Do no harm. So I'm going to close it out here. Wish you all a wonderful day. Your thumbs up are appreciated. And if you're not subscribed, please do. It's always fun projects, always fun things that I'm undertaking on the rancho. If it's not travel, it's projects. We're turning towards homesteading ideas now. Always a lot of fun stuff. So thank you for watching. Thank you. And see you on the next video. I'll get on there and order some parts.